the input stage of asking for information from people for what they feel is important to go into the next plan. There has been no writing yet. So that's the main message we want to get across to you today, and the main message we're emphasizing in a lot of the outreach materials that we have out right now. So I was on a call yesterday and we presented the same slide deck, and there was a great question afterward asking us to summarize kind of the 3 important bullets about the Arctic Research Plan. So I've put those here, basically to tell you what is IARPC and what is the plan. So as directed by law, IARPC develop and implements a 5-year plan. So this would be the 3rd 5-year plan. And the current plan, which is on our website, on the IARPC website and elsewhere, expires, as I said, at the end of 2021, and the new one would start in 2022. So the plan is drafted, and it's really based on current intents of 14 US federal agencies for their work in the Arctic. So it doesn't necessarily establish grounds for brand new work or create new opportunities for funding through IARPC. So it really looks towards those agencies to see what they're doing and how those could be pulled into the plan. But it specifically does that through addressing the needs of northern communities and the non-federal research community across the entire Arctic, but particularly in Alaska, since that is sort of the Magic Arctic region of the US. And so that's sort of what goes into the plan. So it's a lot of coordination to make that plan happen because of all the communication that takes place among the federal agencies and across the broader Arctic community. And so then once it's sort of determined what goals are going to be in there, the plan provides for collaboration teams such as this one to get together and address those goals that are determined to be important that we want to work on going forward for the next 5 years. Specifically those that would advance understanding and solutions and policies in the Arctic. And so that's the role of the collaboration teams, is to bring us all together to then try to get some of this work done and let you know about the work that's already being planned and how we can improve upon that work or come up with new ideas to get things done that we see as really critical. And so that's, these are the collaboration teams that were formed as a result of the current 5-year plan that we're currently working under. And so IARPC is the space by which we do that as well through this great sort of open platform and the great website that they have developed. And then all these different people and entities can take part in that and in these collaboration events that are online, and some of those are in person as well. And then in the bubbles there are all the different names of the current 9 collaboration teams that are working on the current plan and main objectives that were determined. So we envision that some of this will likely carry forward in the next 5-year plan, but that's what we're asking for input on right now, is if this, one of the things we're asking for is this structure working for folks? Do people feel like there needs to be a different structure by which IARPC will move into the next plan? So this is a timeline of what this plan development looks like. So right now we're sort of in the review and planning and also in the development boxes here. So on that far left box, it talks about approval to begin work. And that's basically what are called the principals, or some of the main sort of regional directors or heads of the different agencies have approved us and IARPC to start working on the plan. But as I said, there's been no writing thus far. It's mostly just been starting to pull the groups together to think about how we're going to get input, and then also actually getting that input. And I'll go through some of that in a minute here about what we've done thus far and what we're still doing to gain that input so that we can start writing and developing the plan more formally. So that will go through spring of 2020 and into the fall. In the second box there in yellow, you can see that there has been a Federal Register request put out to the public, which is open now. And that's been extended through to August 2nd to get public input. And the main thing we want to stress there is that that's not the only way to provide input. As I'll show in a minute, there's numerous other ways to give that input, and we're not weighting the input that's being logged in the Federal Register differently than any other input. It's all very similar, but we're just providing as many ways as possible to get that request out to people that we're looking for input. We were hoping to hold public sessions, but as you all know, that's not likely. So at this point, we're looking for other ways to do that and some other kinds of workshops that won't be in person to get the information, especially from different regions within the state. So then after those two sort of have been completed, we'll move into drafting and then ultimately clearance and release, which will happen in late winter of 21, so that this could start in 2022. So in the current Federal Register notice, there's a lot of information, but the main 2 points that we're asking for input on are content of the plan and organization of the plan. So as far as content of the plan, we really want to know what people think are the critical issues facing the Arctic, especially where federally funded research and science can be directed, so that we can understand more about the information that we need or new information that would promote good decision making at all different levels within the Arctic. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, sort of what do people think of the current plan in terms of organization and structure, and would a better structure help to communicate the needs that we're identifying and the goals that we're trying to work on. So those are kind of the 2 main requests currently in the Federal Register, and to everyone else and all the other ways that we're doing it. That's the main request, but certainly we're open to other thoughts as well that people might have. So I think this is my second to last slide. This is just kind of a sampling of ways that people can contribute information and input. As I mentioned, there's the Federal Register notice. There's also a specific email where people can email in information or ideas. There's also a way to submit just written submissions through regular mail, and that is to Roberto Delgado, and that's his information there. We also have an online forum that I'll show you in a second. There's a Facebook page. There are a number of public webinars that have already taken place. There's this one today, and there will be more in the future, and we have a list of all those also on the webpage. And then we're also just working with communities to gather their strategic plans, and we're hoping to host some of the discussions of those strategic plans on this meeting in the near future to learn from different regions of the state and Alaska and elsewhere of what strategic plans currently exist for the Arctic, so that we can better understand how those people have identified those priorities and what they see are priorities, so that we can understand those as we start to meet about developing the next plan.
Hey, John, can I chime in really quick?
Yep, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to note that currently the NSF building is closed for the foreseeable future. So in terms of the written submissions, I'm not sure when we'll be able to get those. So if you would like to submit a written submission, I would suggest, if you can, emailing Roberto first about the best way to submit that, given that we don't know when we'll be able to access the building or the mail again.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. All right, and lastly, as Nikush mentioned when she introduced herself, she's the Plan Development Director, and so her email is here, so she's available. You can email her directly with ideas or comments. And then also Meredith LaValle's email is there, and she can address questions or comments as well. And then if I can, I'll just go to the webpage here and just show you what's here on the website. So this is right off the main IARPC page. There's a button up here called Arctic Research Plan, and then this will take you to this page. This is a listing of the people that are involved in developing the plan currently. So all of these folks can be accessed through this link. And we've met a few times just to sort of get a few things in place. But as I said, no writing's been done yet, since we're waiting on input through all these different links that we have here. So there's a list of upcoming events where we'll be presenting this similar slide deck and addressing questions that people might have. There's also a list of frequently asked questions about the plan and the activities around the plan. There's a place where you can view the current and past Arctic research plans to see what those look like. And then all these different ways to contribute information, some of these that I mentioned already. And then one of the things I wanted to also mention is that we've started a newsletter that will be roughly monthly. And this is a place to sign up for that newsletter that will alert you to sort of upcoming milestones that we need to prepare for, things that have already been done, and just general information about the plan development. We also have a timeline of things that have been done thus far. And mostly it's a timeline of meetings that have taken place either in Alaska or elsewhere that provide information about how to provide input. So very similar to what we've done here today, but all the different places where we've done that so far. And then there's also a timeline here as well that Meredith has been updating. So that's another place to look for that timeline information. So I think that was it as far as presentation. So if anyone has anything they want to add, Nikush or Colleen or Meredith, and then we can also take questions, and we have really the rest of the hour to discuss it and take your comments at this point.
Thanks, John. This is Nikush for those of you who may only be on the phone line. I'll just highlight a couple things that you said, because I think it's worth repeating. I want to encourage everyone to go to the website. This is on the public side of the collaboration team website, so you can get all of this information. Consider signing up for the newsletter at the bottom there, and also to look at, actually, John, can you scroll down a little bit? Here's the paragraph on, go back up. The paragraph right there, the paragraph on strategic plan. So if you click, you can view the list of current resources there. So if you click that, you can see some of the resources that we're collecting. And we're continuing to add this. So if you don't see something on here, let us know, and we'll make sure that that gets on that list. Those two specific things.
Maybe I'll stop sharing at this point, and Meredith, I'll let you pull this up on your screen if there's anything else you want to show folks.
I don't think that there is anything else. I want to acknowledge that there are a couple of people who are just joining through the phone. So some of what we might have said was probably confusing. So just to clarify, there's a page on the IARPC website that you can reach on the public side by clicking the Arctic Research Plan and then going to, I think it's, there's one more, contribute to the next Arctic Research Plan, learn more. So that's there. And all this information is there, including the slides that John presented, mostly are there. So if you have questions, those are resources. And that's all I wanted to add.
And Nikush or Meredith, do we want to talk about other ways that beyond sort of websites and emails that we're trying to send out information? I know we had talked about direct mailings of some of the newsletters and strategic plans.
So I don't know that we've this is Nikush. I don't know that we've exactly figured out how to do direct mailings, considering people are still in stay-at-home orders and not in offices with access to printers and mailings and information. But if there is anyone who I don't even know if we have hard copies anywhere of the previous plan. But if that is something that you would really need, anyone on the phone would really need, let us know, and we'll try to figure out how to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one question I had, John, is can you upload your PowerPoint that you did so those people who are on the phone call could just download that if they need to, or for future evaluation? I mean, because it had all the nice links on it for people.
Yeah, so that is, I think, Meredith, that is on
The standard one.
The standard one is there on the page.
Yeah, I just didn't see it on the call page today, but it must be back on another level. I was just thinking at least a pointer to it would be nice on your announcement page. I didn't see that.
Yep,
Okay.
You're right, Jackie.
So I just wanted to highlight Renee's comment in the chat about looking for strategic documents from international partners. And I'm wondering if you could clarify, given that this is a US federal research plan, kind of how these larger international strategic plans and programs can fit into that.
So are you asking me, Nakush? This is Renee.
I was, sorry, it's Colleen. I wasn't asking you.
Oh.
I kind of wanted to have a kind of, for people who are familiar with the development of the Arctic Research Plan, kind of how, I think your recommendation is a good one, but my question is kind of how do international priorities fit into a US federal document?
Yeah, I made that suggestion because I noticed that strategic plans of international partners was in that one last bullet. And so that's why I zipped off that, that comment.
This is Jackie. I think one way would be the interfacing. For example, we have US reps on all the IAS, International Arctic Science Committee, and the international. And I know the 5-year plan emphasized for the Distributed Biological Observatory because it does have international connections. But as long as I think it's where it interfaces and facilitates US activities, I think that's where the highlight connection is. A lot of we do have, so I think those are the type of pointers, at least that we put in the last 5-year plan, and was emphasized particularly on that one program, or search, you know, the study of environmental Arctic change and sustaining Arctic observing network. But they're US scientists making, you know, where those fit in. I think that's where we put this plan, is that those things are helping what we think are important. And I think a lot of things overlap international.
Yeah.
Hi, this is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Colleen.
No,
yeah,
go.
this is Candace. Sorry, I'm on the phone only. Hi everyone. This is Candace Nackman with NOAA Fisheries, and I just want to piggyback on Jackie's comment. I think it's important to include international priorities, because especially if you look at the current plan and the 4 drivers that we have set up in there, you know, so for example, stewardship and management. I know I'm getting the words wrong because I'm not looking at it, but then, you know, the one about the global Arctic global system, you know, the United States is part of a lot of international agreements and projects. Jackie mentioned Distributed Biological Observatory. The United States is also a signatory to the agreement to prevent unregulated fisheries in the high seas of the Central Arctic Ocean. And so I think by connecting research priorities to those issues, which link very closely to drivers and issues of importance in the 5-year plan, I think that helps make the necessary, I guess, reasoning for why international is important as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think it would be, I mean, I think Jackie, you guys in the last plan came up with some really creative ways to include that. And I'm wondering if we can think about maybe highlighting that some more in the next plan too, about the importance of those connections and supporting those connections in some way. I know obviously as federal employees, and I know as a program officer at NSF, these things can be really difficult to make happen, but we know that it's important, and maybe including that in the plan could help with that.
Yeah, good points.
Along those same lines, each of the Arctic Council working groups has a work plan that may or may not be helpful in this regard, but a lot of agencies are engaged in those projects. So good to keep an eye on those too.
Any other thoughts or comments? Yeah, those are great ones in terms of other strategic plans. And I think as we said, there's a link there that has some there. So we'll definitely add these to that list.
Actually, I got a comment, but it might be, I don't know if this is the right place for it. It's more of the, in general, for the bigger plan. Maybe when you're approaching the villages and the people in the Arctic, it would be good if you were able to just right off the bat, let them know what you are and what you are not. And by what you are, I mean, I'm thinking you should have some tangible, clear examples of how previous plans informed certain aspects of science. So when they ask you what you're up to and what you're doing, because it seems like IARPC has to spend a lot of time on always telling people what the purpose of this plan is. It seems like it's about a quarter of the energy when you're doing these plans. But if you had some real clear, tangible examples, I'm sure there's a ton of examples out there of how previous plans have informed science across the entities. That'd be good to have a few of those examples. And by what you are not, I think it'd be good to right off the bat to let people know in the villages too that, you know, we are, this is a federal plan. We're not involved with, because when you say Arctic research in general, they're going to think of, you know, you got the Alaska State subsistence, like the researchers who kind of have a lot to do with the management, co-management of our resources, and a lot of times that gets drug into the conversation all the time. It's like, okay, well, you know, scientists are out here, you know, doing this and that to our animals, this and that. But the reality is that a lot of federal scientists, especially NSF scientists, don't have anything to do with those type of regulatory aspects. But that's what a lot of people in the villages think science is tied to. So I know I'm not sure if I presented this in a clear way, but I think it'd be good to think about that before you really reach out to a lot of the entities across Alaska, is to really be clear what you are, have some clear, tangible examples that are in layman's terms, and then also let them know that, you know, we're not affiliated with this and that. And then my last point was that it'd be good to try to recruit a little bit more representation from the academics in all of this, because even during the NNAPI meeting, you know, asking a lot of the scientists, because Arctic research is such a huge thing. I think we have, I know that we have a few really good academic scientists on this call, Jackie and others, but I think our IARPC is lacking in recruiting a lot of the people who are actually doing the science out in the Arctic, a lot of the academic side, because it's such a big field of people. But when I ask 10 people in that NNA meeting and only 2 of them are affiliated with the IARPC and they just joined yesterday, and half of them don't even know really what it is. If we're going to really try to direct Arctic research in the big picture, it'd be good to have a little more inclusion from the academic side too as well. But I know that IARPC is just a handful of people, so you guys are doing a heck of a lot of awesome work. But those are just a few comments that I had.
Thank you, Corey. This is Nikush. I think that's a lot of good comments for us to think about and consider as we move forward.
Yeah, I would just add what Kara said, is not only that we're making clarity for the local coastal communities, I think it's clarity even to the science community of what IARPC, you know, and so, I mean, we have those who are invested inside of it know a lot more than those on the outside. So I think we could think of the outreach being across a lot of stakeholders and coming up with some type of more simplified description, so that you know, to go to meetings, so there's an understanding, and we can then blast it out to the AG listeners or Ocean Sciences or ESA or something to that, so that, you know, we don't get hit. Is what the coast, and words that are good for the coastal communities are also good for other scientists that aren't necessarily embedded into IARPC. So I think they're good points that you made.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, Jackie, I completely agree with you and Corey on this topic too. I know I kind of have told Sarah multiple times, like, even as an early career scientist, I found I didn't really know what IARPC was until I became a Fed. And so actually, John, I think that those new bullet points that you added to the presentation really help distill down what exactly the plan is, which I think is really helpful. And maybe using those 3 bullets to kind of help to just say, like, this is what it is and why it's important in future kind of advertisements, whatever we want to call it, would be really helpful for scientists to know what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And yeah, Corey, thanks a lot for those points. And I think that would be good to work on those 3 bullets a bit more, to let people know, like what you said, like who we are and who we are not. I know I do that when I speak as USGS, just to let people know who we are and who we're not when I'm there. And I remember the first time I did a talk on behalf of IARPC, when I spelled out what the acronym says, and I think the word policy really put people on edge, that this group would somehow develop policy. And so I think we need to be really careful about how we describe, what we're doing with IARPC, so that people understand that. So yeah, thanks. Those are good ideas.
Yeah, and I think what's important too is that a lot of us, you know, they're in the working groups or the collaborative teams or the scientists or community, But this is policy. It does rise up. There's a layer above us that is taking this information and making policy from it. And so that's where the P comes in there, but it's for the principals doing this and for the feds that we don't know what goes on in their room except hearsay. So I think it is, you know, people are right to wonder where it goes from collaborative team to the P. So I think we do need to have a kind of an answer.
I'm sure there's a lot of really good examples out there that we just got to track them down and have those. I mean, I'd be excited to see some of those connections as well, the results of all you guys' work.
Yeah, and Corey, if I can, on that note, that's something that we talked about. I can't remember it just recently in a previous meeting, but sort of how we do report on sort of successes and progress when the teams get together. There's a place on the IARPC space where you can post updates and also post sort of accomplishments to all the different objectives that are there. But I think that's the only real place maybe that they go. So I think that's a struggle. We're always wondering how best to get that information out to the people that want it or really need it. And should we direct people to the IARPC space to see that, or should we think about other ways? Certainly we do it through visits, but other ways to communicate that these goals are being, progress is being made.
I think even in your little, your 3 bullet points, if it's a 1-pager, 2-pager style thing, if you had, 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4 clear examples, token examples that you could say just in half a paragraph, kind of, in 2000, on the previous plan, we worked with ICC, they said to, they said to focus on, for instance, food sovereignty, and then find a actual scientist who read that and then wrote a proposal, got the money to try to fulfill that kind of gap there. And then if they got funded, try to find those examples of direct, tangible examples so that people say, hey, it'll kind of gain support, and it'll just give it a little bit more clarity, like bring it back down to earth to say that, this is what we're trying to do. I guess that's what I was thinking, because it's Arctic research, such a huge thing. And when we start having these conversations, people are coming in and saying, well, our moose populations are getting screwed over by these scientists, and that we fought against them in the co-management councils, blah, 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 like those are state scientists, or those are, this like different types of scientists that might not be included in this, that we don't have access to in this platform, I guess.
Yeah, I think one thing we have tried to do before and could do again would be to ask the team leaders from the different collaboration teams to share examples that they have. One thing that we struggle with is that a lot of the collaboration that happens starts maybe on a meeting and then goes off somewhere in that we can't really track. So getting maybe team leaders who have leads on some of those, or asking the general community might be one way to go about getting some of those more intangible connections.
I think this is a really good idea, because I do think, we have these like performance elements that are so federal and it's hard to translate them to kind of people outside of IARPC. And I know the IARPC Secretariat is so good at creating these infographics, like the development of the research plan timeline and things like that. So I'm wondering if we could identify, as Corey suggests, some really good examples, and then maybe make an infographic too, to just kind of really quickly demonstrate kind of how some of these things have led to kind of some positive effects as a result of kind of IARPC work.
Yep. And we actually do have, I should have pointed this out before, we do have one, and I'm copying the link in it now. We developed this a couple months ago, but I think that it might be for more of a science audience as opposed to reaching out to villages and communities in the Arctic.
And maybe another, I'll tap that link here in a second, but even if you like utilize, like, I know IARPC has a big listserv, but then ARCUS has one, kind of utilize some of those listservs and get out a flyer, say, asking people, how has the IARPC plan informed your science, sort of, and then, if someone sees that headline, they'll be, oh yeah, just 5 years ago, I read this one thing in the plan, and planted the seed and inspired me to come up with this idea, and things that we kind of missed. And then if you find a few of those real token examples, and some of them might be more applicable to the village side, some of them might be more applicable to the academic side of the community, and kind of use those strategically.
Great, those are good ideas. And Meredith, I think you've been trying to do some of this at some of the bigger meetings. I know you went to AFN recently, and we've talked about having just an IARPC table at events like that, or at different HC tables to highlight sort of how those agencies are participating in IARPC. And so those are things we've talked about, but I think we need to do a better job at that. So we'll try that and some of these other ideas too.
One day.
Yeah, and Meredith, that link you just sent there, that is nice. I mean, I think that's kind of the idea, something that would be then maybe a little bit more directed towards coastal community. You could have a suite of these depending on who your stakeholder is. It doesn't have to be more than that, because people, if there's links that they could go to that may be a little bit more detail. But I think that's a good example. Thanks.
Yep, great document. That's almost exactly what I was thinking about. Some examples of accomplishments, but good job.
Yeah, that is nice, Meredith. Is this linked from the front? This is linked from the new development page, right?
Yes, it
Or
is.
no?
It's under what is IARPC and what has IARPC accomplished under the relevant documents on the right side of the page. So it's a little bit buried there.
Yeah, and that's where, I think that what you've got there, maybe it needs to, I've had this on my DVO site too by NASA folks saying, it took a while to dig into it to find what they were looking for, and it was there. So my lesson of that conversation was to bring it higher up to the landing page, and say, this is where you go for this, so that people say, oh yeah. So I think this particular case should go higher up. So when people go to IARPC, they see it right away. Just a suggestion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. We really appreciate all of that type of input, because it really helps us refine what we're doing.
So Meredith, this is Renee.
Hi, Renee.
I may have missed this, but is there a plan to have any sort of virtual public outreach meetings with any of the Native communities?
Yeah, so
Want me
we've
to take
had,
that, Meredith?
yeah, yep.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say we've had to pivot from our original plan, and I was going to let you explain what we're kind of working on.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Yeah, so we, like everyone, have had to pivot with the sort of new situation where everyone's staying at home and not traveling, and we're looking at different ways to connect with communities that is, I want to say very respectful of whatever the community decides in terms of what is safe for them, what they have determined, how they want things to go. So one of the things we're thinking about and moving forward with is connecting with some of the regional organizing and focused indigenous entities, and working, partnering with some of them to, potentially partnering with some of them to, so that they can sort of run their internal process to however they would get input normally on things, and then feed that input back into our process, into the IARPC process. So we haven't had those meetings. We haven't had those meetings yet, and so I hesitate to really talk a lot about, the details of what that might look like without without having that initial conversation.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can I say a comment as a cautionary comment? You know, that this example that I'm gonna give is not, it has to do with like oil development and all that, so it carries a lot more negativity with it. But you know, we all know that the BLM had their virtual hearings online. I had several of them, and to me, I mean, I listened into them, and to me, it looked, they did everything they could to make it as best they could. I mean, they contacted the regional radio stations, so they had it live aired. They really publicized the telephone number to call in, and then they had these big Zoom conferences, which were held by Joy Huntington, who's, you know, a native contract business or consultant. But regardless of all that, the lack of connectivity in the villages, that point alone, it really drew a lot of negative feedback from the communities. BLM was, I know that it's tied to oil development, so it has that, it's different than Arctic Research Plan, but still them saying, you know, federal entities are expecting our people to use up our internet so that we can provide comments, you know, and then it was like a very, very heavily negative thing online. People were really pissed off about it. So just to give warning, you know, I know this doesn't have that negative connection to oil development, but it still might be seen as a federal entity trying to hold connectivity or trying to hold these virtual meetings where, you know, everyone in the cities has all this great internet and everyone in the villages has horrible internet, so they get a hand up kind of thing. And I just, I know it's just kind of a sensitive issue, but I just wanted to say that regardless of everything we do, everything right, we're probably going to get a lot. If you do virtual hearings sort style things where you're getting feedback from the communities, there's probably going to be a lot of people really pissed off because they, even if they weren't going to take part in it, if it was, you know, in person, they'll still have to face that, face those people. So just a precautionary note.
For sure. Thanks, Corey. I think that's a good point. I saw that happen. Well, yeah, and this is one of the reasons why, and Corey's one of the organizations that I reached out to, but some of the regionally focused partners to have a discussion about what might possibly work in the current situation that we're in, and how can we support the work that they're doing already in the communities in a way that makes sense for that community. So we're hoping to have that conversation next week.
So this is Renee, and I appreciate that background and those boundaries and the challenges that you are facing. Given that, is there some thought about possibly delaying the release of the new IARPC plan to take into consideration, you know, the delays from, delays about, you know, outreach to the communities?
So thanks, Renee. That question has come up. It's definitely come up. It's been on our minds. But right now we still have, we're working within sort of the federal guidelines and mandate of when the current plan ends and at the end of 2021, and that we need to have a new plan start, you know, by 2022. So, you know, we're kind of working within that. It doesn't seem like things are going to get pushed out. We have pushed some deadlines. The Federal Register Notice Request for Information we extended that deadline by a month. We pushed out some workshop that was planned for the summer to September. And I'll be honest with you, me personally, I don't know that our situation is going to be much different next year after that, you know, until there's a vaccine in place, right? Like So in some way, like, we have to figure out how to make it work or change things to make it work better.
Right. And unless I'm wrong, I mean, this is a legal requirement. And I mean, I honestly, if you had a gap year of not having a plan in place, we would be going backwards, I think. You know, I don't know what, you know, just the way things are going. We just don't know where things are going to be by the end of this year. I know what our situation by the government will be. But I think that we want to make sure we keep continuity. And if this isn't going into place in 2021, I would think we just need to keep going forward the best we can to get as much info as we can. That's my 2 cents. But you guys are the government. I'm just an academic. But I am a citizen.
And just another thought about actually going into the village. I don't know if you guys saw it yesterday, but Dr. Ann Zink, our advisor to the governor on, I don't know what her position is, but she's basically taking care of the whole COVID-19 response in Alaska and gives the daily updates and everything. She actually, her and a few others actually traveled out. She traveled out to Nome and then traveled out to Stebbins just 2 days ago to go and meet face-to-face with people. Pretty surprised to see that, but I was also pretty surprised that she was welcomed with good responses on kind of online forums. I think what they did was they just tested the group in Nome, kept them isolated and tested them. They all were all negative and they didn't have any symptoms, so I guess they're clear that way. But I'm thinking if I'm always thinking of the Alaska Native entities side of engagement side of things, but if IARPC did still want to do kind of face-to-face meetings with relevant entities and maybe places where there's concentrated research, Barrow, some other places, that might be an option to send Nakush out and just have, work with the local clinics, and, when you get to Barrow, do the test and kind of have that lined up. But that's another way. If you guys really feel like face-to-face is necessary, I've seen in the last few days that might be an option because the tests are more readily available. Especially in Nome, they have one of those rapid tests that was donated to them by Billy Graham's Samaritan Purse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that notice too that she went out. I also saw the notice that that they quarantined and tested every day, I think, and then didn't have any meetings indoors. Didn't have any meetings indoors. So like outdoors with a lot of distance, between people. And at least one of the places they did a flyover, so they didn't actually stop. Yeah, but yeah, I did see that. It was Dr. Zink, who's the state chief medical officer. And I thought it was a federal employee. Do you know which federal employee it was? I want to say it was Department of Homeland Security. That sounds right.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. It was a small group, though. Yeah. 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 Another thing to think about.
And
We just have 4 minutes. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say we have 4 minutes left, and if there was,
sorry.
Some people might be in listening mode, but if you haven't had a chance to talk yet and you wanted to make a comment, now's a good time. Doesn't look like anyone's going to jump forward. You had one last thing, Corey.
Oh no, I just was still spitting out ideas. I just know that the tests are readily available, at least around here in Anchorage. They're telling people they can just do the drive-through. I guess that's at Alaska Native Hospital, but they have antibody testing. You don't even have to have symptoms to get the test, apparently. So it sounds like they're readily available, at least up here on our end in Alaska.
Okay. No last comments. John, Meredith, anyone else who wants to chime in?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone. This has been a really valuable discussion. When we started to open it up an hour ago, we sort of said, well, maybe this will just be a short meeting and we'll give the presentation. And so I really appreciate all the commentary and discussion that we've had. This has been really helpful. And yeah, we'll keep you all posted with upcoming meetings, and look on that page there because there's a lot of other meetings where we'll have the same discussion, and it'd be a good chance to hear from other groups that attend those collaboration teams too, and see what people's perspectives are. And then, yeah, sign up for the newsletter because that will be a great place to go for information, and we'll keep those coming out, we hope, monthly. So that would be a great place to go and look, and it'll just come straight to your inbox. So that'll be helpful.
Mm-hmm. We ask that you forward that out to your network if you're able, so feel comfortable doing that.
Yep, and I'll just point out that the plan is to have some space, maybe not quite as much time, but some space devoted to an update on where we are in the process of plan development at every coastal resilience team meeting. So this is another regular spot to go.
Thanks again, everyone, for your time. It's been really helpful. We'll follow up on some of the comments made here.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.